So per our conversation that we had before the committee hearing started, and I do realize that you brought into the situation that had been developing over multiple decades. I would like to know exactly where we are now and because in my mind, our caisson platoon should be the most elite organization on the planet. I think our service members are owed that. This football has been handed to you, and of course you're running it down the field. And now in military services is timed, and I know that eventually you will have to hand this off to someone else. But I want to hear how we are doing and when we can expect the caisson platoon to be reactivated for military services.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. So we are on a good glide path to resuming operations. As I mentioned, the 5 key milestones that we are following to restart our program. The first one is facilities and land acquisition. So we have to renovate the 1906 historic stables on Fort Myer, and we have to procure adequate land and facilities to turn out the horses. Previously, we only had about 6 acres that belonged to the Army. We are in the process of acquiring up to 150 acres to support the caisson platoon mission in the
time frame on when that acquisition will be complete?
We are in about the 90% stage right now. It's working through its final clearance process, and we could potentially look at pending approval in some language in the National Defense Authorization Act by next spring.
So that language revolves around the NDA being passed?
Yes, Congressman.
Great, duly noted.
And Congressman, the next part is horse procurement. So we talked briefly about some of the challenges we had in terms of having to rehabilitate horses. We have retired about 40 horses, but we have procured and now have 2 fully trained and certified squads within our formation. Over the last 6 weeks, we procured an additional 8 horses. Once we fill that up to 11, they will begin their training. And so by March or April of next year, we could have up to 3 trained and certified squads. We have to procure our 4th, and the min standard that we've established within the Army is once we achieve 4 squads of fully certified horses, that is when we look to restart caisson operations in Arlington National Cemetery.
We had discussed a possible MOS in the Army being adopted or being created for the caisson platoon, much like the soldiers for the unknown soldiers. I'm sorry, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers. Can you give me a left or right flank on the best course of action? Right now, because we're using contracted agents, correct?
For some of the requirements, yes, Congressman.
And I know that knowledge base that was created over the decades and decades and decades is no longer with us, hence the dive in what the caisson platoon, how that went away. How are we structured to recreate that knowledge base?
Thank you, Congressman, for the question. The first thing we've done is we've brought on board some highly qualified experts to advise us on the requisite skill sets. So, we have a highly qualified expert at my level. He's the U.S. Equestrian Federation Chief of Sport. We also have one at the Old Guard level who is a U.S. renowned horse hitch driving trainer who's been doing this for decades. One of the challenges we faced is we had previously recruited soldiers for the caisson platoon only out of the Old Guard. So that's about 1,500 soldiers availability. They did not all have horse experience, so we had to bring them on and teach them basic horsemanship skills. We have expanded that recruiting pool to the entire Army through working with the Department of the Army and the recruiting and retention apparatus. We are also trying to identify through talent management people who grew up with horse skills. We've actually brought a couple of officers on recently that have grew up with horse skills and did helped to run horse programs before they commissioned into the Army. What we are also doing is looking at ways we can keep people in the formation longer. So you mentioned the MOS. So we are looking at the potential for creating an MOS that may allow soldiers to stay in the caisson formation longer. Challenges associated with that are, what is their career progression timeline? What is their professional development schedule? We've done this with other formations. The U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone, who also falls under my purview, has that set up. So we are looking at ways we could potentially have an MOS that has an additional skill identifier that allows them to stabilize for longer than just a 2 or 3 year assignment. The other part is we're looking at the medical community. We've been working with the the veterinary and service organizations to identify and enough large equine vets to support, adequately support the case on mission.
Thank you, General.